gummy bear.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for February 8th, 2023. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, it is Nintendo Direct Day, but first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host to Game Mess Mornings. It's Lexi Luddy from TheGamer. Lex, how's it going?
I'm not too bad. I was really hoping to wear my giant bomb hash, and then I realized I left it at my parents' house. So instead, my trucker Star Fox Zero hash will have to do.
That is perfection. It couldn't get any better. I prefer this. That is a good look. Man,
yeah,
that
to celebrate.
That hat is it is just the cover art on the hat, and that's exactly what I would want in life.
I found it at Gamescom, and it was like in a bin of Dead Space 3 trucker hats and all these other like franchises for like €5 each, and just had never been sold. Yeah, they needed to get rid of them.
I've been reeling since last night when I discovered that there were a line of DS games that were like, the budget ones. Oh, they've been out for a while. We're going to sell them again, and they're reprints or whatever. And the cover art is just a DS cover, and then on the cover is the cover of the original game. So it's like a DS case inside of a DS case sort of thing. And apparently there was a whole line of these. And I can't get over it. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened. I really am going to get it printed and put on my wall. There's a concept page.
That's just the video game equivalent of the Hot Fuzz thing of the guy with the Employee of the Month behind him.
Yes, it's exactly that. And I love it. I love video games. This is the industry where you could pull that off. And it was so normal back then that I didn't even register, because I'm sure I saw these before. It just didn't even register then. And now I'm looking back, I'm like, what the hell was anyone thinking? What is this? Why did they do it this way? I love you, video games. All right. Lexi, I wanted to have you on. You reached out. You're like, hey, Hogwarts Legacy stuff. Everyone's talking about it. We wrote some stuff over on TheGamer about how we are and are not going to talk about it and cover it. I wanted to have that conversation, cap it off here with you, because I think this would be a good way to sort of lead us out of this little segment of the games industry where everyone's obsessing over this game. And I think there's still some points to be made. I've been thinking about it a lot. Obviously, been following my Twitter. I can't help myself. I still keep tweeting about it. That's just me. I'll tell you where I'm at, and then we'll go from there. On Monday, I was like, man, boycotts don't work. They and that's because it's a capitalist lie and all this stuff. And since then, I've sort of changed my mind a little bit on that based on the reaction to it. Now, the game is very successful. It's making a lot of money, and there was just, and I think the realization came when it's like no one was ever going to be able to stop that. What you could do is, it's the equivalent of a protest getting in the road and annoying people. Maybe things could be a little annoying sometimes. And does that fix anything now? No, but I think it does have a long-term effect. And I'll just speak for myself. If Warner Brothers ever came to me and was like, hey, would you want to take money to advertise something Harry Potter related on your stuff? No way. Would never, ever do it. And that is, I was already leaning in that way. But I can be 100% confident about that because of this whole entire reaction that's happened. And to me, that's the needle moving in the right direction slowly over time. And I think that can happen in terms of the estimation of Harry Potter as well, the series, and then how that reflects on J.K. Rowling. If we look at who is championing this now, there's some normal people out there, but it's also like Ben Shapiro out there taking victory laps. And in my opinion, I think that makes it seem very uncool. And I think that can have a long-term effect as well. And if that's the goal here, to diminish J.K. Rowling's stature so that we can diminish the things she says that are transphobic, then I do think things are working. I don't know if that sounds right to you. I still want to get your opinion on it. How are you feeling about all this today and about covering this game going forward?
Yeah, so for my part, just to so people actually know where I'm coming from, as a trans person who for a long time in their life was compared to Harry Potter, I had the circle glasses, I had a scar on my forehead from when I was a kid, all this different stuff. I always hated the fucking books, but I loved the movies. And so that's like where I'm coming from with this, and I've sort of been done with the franchise long before I was done with J.K. Rowling the person. When it comes to TheGamer and how TheGamer is treating it, we're not writing a review, we're not doing evergreen content, which are basically the two biggest sources of income for most games media places. The only places that we do have any writing about it is our editor-in-chief and our features lead, who are both trans women, are writing about it on occasion and critiquing it and commenting on it there. I sort of like had written some of the things I was going to bring up and sort of talk to you about, and what you said basically of yesterday, or yes, Monday, where you were sort of talking about the capitalist system and there's very little we can do to change that. I was very much so wanting to challenge you on that at the time, but you know, basically saying what you brought up there yourself, which is the idea of like, hey, just because this won't change anything doesn't mean I can't make a personal moral choice. I can't say that I don't want to add to the pile of money that she has. Sure, she has a pile of money no matter what, but you don't have to add to it.
Yes.
The two pieces of writing that I shout out are one by Merritt K around the time Saints Row came out, which was you aren't owning anyone by buying Saints Row or any game, which is a great bit of writing, and also Willow Rowe over at Inverse wrote clapping for Hogwarts Legacy is bad and you should feel bad. Both of those are really good things to read up on and take a look at, and sort of educate yourself around like why maybe a boycott is a pretty reasonable thing, especially if you personally disagree with Rowling and you're on the fence about the game. The other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was like highlighting some of the places that I felt the games media has really kind of failed in covering this game. Something that we saw a lot when the reviews were going out was sort of like one paragraph at the beginning, and that paragraph was like, you know, J.K. Rowling, she has problematic views and we can't avoid those. But then the reviews would go on to basically completely avoid those. And on top of that, by just calling them problematic views, you're really diminishing what her views actually are. Like, she's not a child who thinks every Italian character sounds like Mario. She's not a elderly person that is misinformed about queer people or something. She is very much so a very loud, a very aggressive, and a very angry bigot who has spearheaded a violent anti-trans movement, especially in the UK, where she has called for violence, segregation, and mutilation of queer people. On top of that, like, even if you just look at her Twitter from the last few days, she is calling for women to be sent to men's prisons because they're trans. And the idea of throwing your lot in with that people, and the idea of, hey, I'm buying this game to own people, to own the libs or whatever, it's just keeps on breaking down on that front. The other part that I really frustrated me about the coverage over the last few days has been, and like, I don't want to call out anyone in particular, but IGN are the biggest website and they can take this. Like, they put up their thing and they sort of said, like, you know, it's our place to just tell you if a game is fun or not. And that is such a regressive way to look at the games industry and the games media, and it's putting yourself down and your employees down to such a extreme degree. I'm sure lots of people remember when Jeff Gersman would talk about, you know, how at GameSpot they'd have their very strict rating system of like, this game is factually an 8 because it has an Asian sound, it has an 8, whatever. Like, we've moved past that, and the idea of critics nowadays is that it is a piece of art and it's a person, and it's how those two things intertwine, and then you reflect on that, and that's your writing, that's your review. And saying that a review is actually just a factual, is this thing good or fun or not, you're basically just like asking for PR at that point. You don't want a review. You just want to hear if the game is playable. And like, pretty much every major game is playable at this point. You know, this isn't the days of when licensed games were basically unplayable and were terrible. You don't need someone at IGN, Kotaku telling you if the game is fun. Like, there's a bare minimum that most games hit at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the main things I want to talk about, was like, it just feels like we've kind of failed trans people in a lot of ways in actually.
It goes without saying. I'm glad we have to say it, but it goes without saying that we've been failing, and that's continues to be my biggest frustration. Is just when people with platforms step up and their concern trolling is all about these poor gamers that are being harassed for buying a video game, and I actually don't give a fuck. I actually don't care. I don't. I might come out as pro bullying, like I'm on the verge of it. I keep like maybe adults can be bullied a little bit for their decisions, and I don't know. I feel like it happens to me all the time, and I'm like this. I think this is actually just called criticism. It feels like it's just called criticism, and yeah, maybe sometimes it's a bit extreme, but most of the time it just feels like criticism. And as an adult, I'm usually pretty okay saying, okay, let me look for the substance here, and try to move on from there. But I like going back to what you said originally about making an own personal moral decision. I think that everyone should buy their conscience. I think you should be listening to your conscience and trusting it. And then that doesn't necessarily mean fully buying into that lie of you vote with your wallet, because to me that's such a disenfranchising notion, because people have bigger wallets than me and are capable of speaking much louder. And maybe it's true, but it is still like a scary notion that if voting with your wallet, well, then who can vote the most is just a scary thing. But I still think that this conversation and taking over Twitter for days and annoying people to the point where then it takes over YouTube with everyone having to have their own take on it there. It is part of this system of criticism. We have a system of capitalism and we have a system of criticism. And ideally, one would be pushing up the system of criticism is there to push against the reigning thing that does control everything in our lives. And we should use it. And it's messy and everybody is sort of a part of it. I think there's something to be said for people having a honey and vinegar. Like, you win more people over with honey and vinegar. I think you need the vinegar as well as the honey, because you need to make people uncomfortable to even be looking in the direction of like, well, who's the person that has the mild take here that I can agree with? The thing the right wing does really well is have this treadmill system of slowly bringing people in with someone that does have a mild right-wing take. And then when you get slightly radicalized by them, there is another person waiting just to the right of them every step of the way that will be more and more extreme until they are just shooting you into the QAnon factory. The left and this critical system doesn't usually do that very well. But I think in an ideal way, it's messier, and when everyone is just kind of throwing out their criticisms together, it can have a similar effect. It just takes a lot longer, as justice often does. I don't know. I think where do we go from here? Like the next time we're in a situation like this, when this game gets a sequel, which inevitably will happen, what do you hope changes? What do you hope will be different the next time?
Honestly, I think one of the big things that like I kind of hope people realize is like just how exhausting it all is. Like it's not me saying, try to put yourself in my shoes or other trans people's shoes, but it's just realizing that like, hey, you've spent the last month making the biggest talking point on the internet, basically, are trans people real people? All for the sake of a video game. And that wears down the actual humans on the other side. The other humans who are just saying, like, guys, I just asked you not to buy a game because it was created by an asshole. Like,
yeah. What is the like? You could choose to ignore that, right? Like, but you're freaking out and acting like you're the real victim here. It is bananas that is the reaction to that. And then people say it's just a video game. Yeah, it's just a video game. Why are you valuing it more than the lives of trans people? That's kind of that. I know that you don't want to hear that, but that is my takeaway most of the time when I see people say that sort of stuff. It's hard for me to assume that anything else is true about you. I don't know why people keep forcing themselves in that position unless it's true about them. But yeah, I'm sorry. Keep going.
I think the thing that like I feel worst about is, people will say, think of the poor developers. I think of the poor developers in the sense that like the piece of art that they've been working on for all these years has now become just another part of the culture war. Yeah. And they had no intention of that being the case. They had no interest in that being the case. even if they didn't want to make a Harry Potter game, they probably wanted to make a good game. But whatever they've made now is part of the culture war, and it's going to continue to be a part of that, and it's going to be used as a stick to beat certain people with for the next 5 years or whatever. And yeah, it just feels like there's no winners in this. Congratulations, you've given a corporation and a bigot more money. Like they're the only people who are winning, who come out on top.
And it's embarrassing to see people do that victory. That like, hell yeah, I thought there was a boycott, but it made $1.3 billion. Just shut the fuck up. Yeah, it's embarrassing. You are just cheerleading a corporation and a billionaire, and it's the most distasteful, like tacky stuff. Like even before we get to the morality, you just look like a goddamn loser. It's just bizarre loser shit. I hate it. All right. Any other final thoughts on this before we kind of get back into the regular show?
Game looks a bit shit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't. I kind of don't. I don't get it.
Not saying that any of the reviewers are like not personally speaking their own honest truth, but like I don't get it. It doesn't look great.
Yep.
And those books were never that good. Those books were never that well written.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who liked the books, and it's just been sort of. I remember when I first had kids, like already at that point being like not as excited about it as I once was, but being like I kind of can't wait to read this to my kids, and then slowly thinking about it over time. And of course, the transphobic stuff gave me a chance to reassess what the content of the books themselves. And then, it was that Sean video that really just put all in the words, right? I mean,
I had a conversation with my mom a little while ago where I was, talking to her about Harry Potter or whatever, however came up. And she was like, I was so happy when your brother or sister decided that they didn't want me to read them those books anymore, and they wanted to read them themselves because I just couldn't read that writing anymore because I didn't like the style of writing. Like I had gone from reading them the Chronicles of Narnia, which I had loved, and then I had to read them this, and I was like, this world building and this prose is terrible.
I'll say my final thing here will be like, I know a lot of people hear this and be like, I'm not a bad person because I like something, and I'm going to say that I disagree. I think we're all bad people because we exist in the system, and we should all just feel culpable because it makes us more likely to want to do something about it. I know that everything. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism. There is two things you can do about that. One, you could be a nihilist and be like, well, nothing matters, so that then no, there is no morality underneath this. Or you could be like, well, then we're all guilty. And we could maybe look for every little bit where we feel comfortable trying to do something, or even when we feel discomfort, trying to do a little bit to make things a little bit better. I mean, I know which one I choose, although I don't necessarily blame people for being nihilist. I don't about this because it is so overbearing. All right. I wanted to thank you for having the conversation. No, thank you for coming on. Seriously, this is excellent. Thank you so much. An imperfect conversation about a messy topic, but that's what we do here. What else we do here? Let's explain it. Most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings, or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with the CMA says Microsoft Activision deal could harm UK gamers. This comes directly from the CMA's website. A CMA investigation has provisionally concluded that Microsoft's proposed acquisition of Activision could result in higher prices, fewer choices, or less innovation for UK gamers. The provisional findings from the Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, follow a wide-ranging investigation conducted over the last 5 months to understand the market and potential impact of the deal. This has included holding sites visits and hearings to hear documents from the two businesses to understand their views on the market, commission an independent survey of UK gamers, and gathering evidence from a range of other gaming console providers, game publishers, and cloud gaming services. Basically, what this breaks down to is as Martin Coleman explains, who is the chair of the independent panel of experts conducting the Phase 2 investigation for the CMA, he said, it's been estimated that there are around 45 million gamers in the UK, and people in the UK spend more on gaming than any other form of entertainment, including music, movies, TV, and books. So they're setting the stakes. Strong competition between Xbox and PlayStation has defined the console gaming market over the last 20 years. Exciting new developments in cloud gaming are giving gamers even more choice. So they set the stakes. They say, hey, here's what could change. Here's what's under threat. Our job is to make sure that UK gamers are not caught in the crossfire of global deals that over time could damage competition and result in higher prices, fewer choices, or less innovation. We have provisionally found that this may be the case here. We have also today sent the companies an explanation of how our concerns might be resolved, inviting their views and any alternative proposals that they wish to submit. We'll talk about some of those in a second, but Lexi, what's your first reaction here?
This very much so feels like the CMA sort of saying like, okay, Microsoft, like, what are you going to give us?
Yes.
And it just, like, Microsoft made it very clear, like, hey, we're not going to, make any concessions early on. And now the CMA have sort of responded and said, like, you're going to have to give us something. And I think it's a pretty smart move on their part. I think that Microsoft are probably, like, they knew this was coming. This isn't a surprise to them. They knew that they were going to be asked for something by someone, by either the FTC or the CMA. And I think, like, the CMA saying, hey, what if, like, it was Call of Duty you didn't give up, is them sort of pushing the boat out and seeing how far they can push it. And so it'll be interesting to see what Microsoft comes back with and says, like, hey, what if we gave you this instead?
Yeah, I think, so some of those remedies do include spinning, basically, in so many words, spinning off Call of Duty into its own business and selling that off. That's pretty much exactly what happened with Disney when it was trying to acquire Fox, and Fox Sports was part of that, and Disney already owned ESPN. So the regulators are like, well, we can't let this happen. So Disney's like, okay, well, then we'll work out a deal here where Fox is able to spin off Fox Sports, and it became Bally Sports and all these other things. So this stuff has happened. It's pretty common. It's the kind of thing that can get you over this hurdle. The question is, does Microsoft want to get over the hurdle without Call of Duty? I mean, clearly not. I mean, the obvious answer is no, they don't want to do that if they don't have to. I think if push came to shove and they had to make a choice, I do think they would still go through with it without Call of Duty. But I think they're going to try everything they possibly can up to that point to keep it. The CMA made some suggestions that's basically said, yeah, you could try to give us some promises that you won't do something or you'll do this other thing. But we don't really trust that. We want to see structural changes, not behavioral changes. And so the structural would be spinning it off and instead of we're going to promise to do it for so long. But I will say that it does seem like the CMA has also softened its position slightly. They were previously very worried about Call of Duty getting into Game Pass and how that would be unfair. Well, the CMA has dropped that, and that's likely because Sony is doing very similar stuff with Destiny 2 on PlayStation Plus. And so it's, that's just the way the market works at a certain point. But it does seem like, so they're at least willing to step back when they see a situation where okay, well, we've compared how both, big players in this market behave. And if 1-to-1, this seems pretty fair. So I think Microsoft probably sees a door still slightly ajar to make some sort of promise to say Call of Duty won't just be on Sony systems or, in Steam and Nintendo, but also we will make a commitment and, contractual commitment to these governments saying that we will enable Call of Duty to be on any cloud service going forward that is able to host it. And that maybe that's enough, but it's 10 years, a long time, maybe still not long enough for Sony, so there'll probably still be some complaints. Do you think Microsoft's gonna be able to thread this needle and keep keep Call of Duty on the way out on the other side?
So I think something that's come up, and it came up a few times in previous Game S mornings, is the idea, we're kind of ready for this story to be over. But every time I hear that, I'm like, no, let this go for as long as it needs to go, because at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen is that this is an extremely thorough investigation of what is the biggest acquisition in this industry and most other industries ever. When you really take a look back at the scale of this thing and you realize this is why they're taking so long. This is why everything is being argued over and is being ironed out. like suddenly it becomes a lot more reasonable that this is taking 1.5 to 2 years.
Yes.
And when you consider how many lives are at stake, how many people's jobs are at stake, all of those different things, this isn't just, hey, will Call of Duty be on PlayStation? That's not the thing that matters. But them investigating every single aspect of it this thoroughly means that that is the thing that's being honed in on at the moment. And if that's the thing that they decide to plant their flag in, I'm fine with that, as long as they are doing their job, which is making sure that there isn't a monopoly. There probably isn't, but they're doing a really good job of investigating it. I think something that was interesting was you saw, we'll get to it, but Bobby Kotick coming out and saying like, oh, they don't know our industry. That is like such a... You, as someone who's been on the business side of things, you probably know that like as soon as a government starts to look at industries, that is such a quick thing to go to of like, oh, you just don't get why this is good. You don't get why this would be fantastic and no one would, you know, be disenfranchised by this. But yeah, I think that they're in the right to investigate this fully. Like they can do what they want. So
I think yes, 100%. I think the frustration comes from when I do look at this. I don't see the CMA mentioning what the future of employees and what it's like under one company, what it could be like under another. I don't think that's necessarily their purview either, so I'm not too surprised they aren't mentioning that. But it's like they aren't mentioning that, and then it also does feel a little bit like, not to throw my lot in with fucking Bobby Kotick, that they don't necessarily fully understand the dynamics of the gaming industry, at least in terms of the way it's worked the last decade or so, where these big companies are acquiring smaller things usually, although Activision might be an example of like this not being the way it works. But acquisitions are important because a lot of these smaller studios are going out there trying things, and they are doing research and development that bigger companies are risk adverse to doing. And so there still needs to be a reward structure in place for these smaller companies, and sometimes that means they get acquired by something like Activision Blizzard, and then Activision Blizzard does that because it's either going to make its stocks go up or it can then get acquired itself, and everyone gets paid off in the end, and then all the people that made all that stuff who have stocks can go about their lives and take their money, and they've won the day. Disrupting that, it could be potentially harmful to the health of the overall industry. And I've never seen any of these regulators sort of acknowledge that, because that's not how it works in tech. In tech, it can work that way, but in movies, music, places where they've looked at other things, especially that Fox deal, and it's like, well, Disney's going to be the only one making shows. And it's like, yeah, that's you're right. That's a problem. That's bad. We should have done something about that. Someone should have stopped that from going through. In games, there is no risk of Microsoft being the only thing that's going to be making games. I talked today on Twitter about how Hades is this super influential thing. The next Hades is probably not going to come from Microsoft. It's probably not going to come from Sony or Activision or anything like that. It's going to come from some creator out of nowhere. And that's not to say that life's easy out there for indies, but those indies are doing that sort of stuff because they can either get a big payday on Steam, or they come up with an idea that is worth investing in or acquiring. And again, disrupting that system could be problematic. But that's not to say that the CMA and these other regulators should rush along. They should take more time to understand this stuff. And I think you're right that if we get closer to that over time, then this is better than them just sort of like doing a glancing look over and being like, well, $69 billion, who cares? It's too big to do that. It's obviously too big, right?
So something that I am actually curious to get your opinion on is, let's say, like, hypothetically, they do say, okay, you have to divulge Call of Duty, you have to leave that behind. How long do you think that a company that is just Call of Duty can survive? And how does a company as big as Activision even go about divesting itself from something
I don't know
as big as, like, Call of Duty makes up a lot of Activision. Like, let's not forget, most of that company is the Call of Duty company at this point.
Yeah,
what are you buying then at that point?
I mean, I think that what that means is then you are divesting basically Activision, and then maybe you still get some of the IPs that Activision owns, but you're letting Activision go off and just be the Call of Duty company, and then you're getting Blizzard and King.
Yeah.
And then a handful of Activision IP.
That's a way less appealing deal.
Absolutely.
You've suddenly spent a lot of money on two companies that, like, King, yes, but Blizzard isn't doing the gangbusters it was doing previously.
I mean, let's be very clear. that if that's the circumstances, the deal just almost certainly doesn't go through. That's the reality. It probably doesn't actually happen if it has to go to that extreme. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, Microsoft hasn't really had the chance to bring its argument to bear against these specifics. The CMA, I think the EC, European Commission in Europe, were sort of like, please just let us do our investigations first before you even bring any of your own remedies, and then we'll start hearing them. So it's like, okay, well, let's see what Microsoft came up with in these months that it's had to pay all these high-priced lawyers to come up with arguments for why they should let this deal go through mostly unscathed. And let's see if they have anything. I guess that's the next step. And I'm curious to see it. I just don't. It doesn't seem like that stuff's been too convincing so far. And we'll see. And we'll see if regulators have the capacity to change their mind on this. There's more other aspects of this story. One of the interesting tidbits out of the CMA: a quarter of PlayStation Call of Duty players would reportedly switch to Xbox if it were made exclusive. This is one of the things that the CMA talks about a lot. Like Microsoft, sure, they're saying they won't make it exclusive, but they believe that Microsoft has a financial incentive to do so. And we'll talk about that in a second. The UK's Competitive Markets Authority, this comes from Sean Murray at TheGamer. The CMA has released its provisional report on the Microsoft Activision merger and found that it may be expected to result in a substantial lessening of competition in gaming consoles and cloud gaming services in the UK. The assessment came after the CMA reviewed 3 million business documents and several consultations with the public. And they found that as part of that survey they did with gamers, that the large majority of our surveyed respondents, i.e. COD gamers as described above, indicated that the content available on a console is important to their choice of console. And around 24% of them said they would divert away from PlayStation if Call of Duty were no longer available on that platform. And I think, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe that number is a bit higher than I would have expected, but that's the kind of power that Call of Duty has, and we all know it. It's what makes it so valuable, right?
I mean, yeah, like hell, that was the case with Sega and Madden. Like, even going back then, it was like people don't go to consoles for which one is the most powerful. They do go to consoles for what games they have. And PlayStation currently has the, cinematic AAA games. But if Xbox were the only ones with the multiplayer games that you could play with your friends, it's very easy to see a lot of people going like, fuck this, I want to play with my friends every weekend. Like, that is a big turning point for people, is where can they play with their friends?
Yes, and it's like, it's a social thing. It's like if suddenly golf was exclusive to one country, I guess maybe some golfers would move to that country. That sort of thing. I'll point out that the CMA is right that Microsoft has done research about the value of making things exclusive and how things sort of balance out typically in favor of Microsoft when they make that call. I mean, I think that's not too surprising. We see that happen. Sony does the same thing. It's the reason Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft have exclusive games. But Microsoft ran the numbers when they acquired Bethesda. It's one of these things that I heard at the time, especially in that period when everyone's like, what's going to happen with exclusivity? And Microsoft was being pretty, we'll talk about it when we talk about it. Well, they were, during that time, trying to figure out every possibility, and they considered every possibility. And they had spreadsheets, and like, if we do this, we'll make this much money if it's on PlayStation. But if we make it exclusive, we will make less money overall. But the money that we're losing is essentially equal to the cost that we might spend to promote Game Pass, and having these games exclusive is a better promotion for that. So it's actually more valuable to us. That's I think it's what the CMA says or sees when they hear Microsoft say we have no incentive to make things exclusive. That is clearly not true, and that's where Microsoft's biggest stumbling block is they need to be more honest about that if they think that they're going to be able to, because they're not going to be able to pull one over. You were talking about, they're looking into this, and these governments are able to mostly understand what's going on here. Some of the specifics of the dynamics, I don't think they have a good handle on. The idea that there's incentives for making things exclusive, they clearly understand that, and they're seeing through Microsoft saying that they would have no incentive, right?
Yeah, and I can very easily imagine a politician being sat down and being told, like, hey, last time this happened, they did make the games exclusive.
Yes, very easy to understand.
That is a very clear, like, oh, there is a case study here. We know how they treated another similar, like, not nearly as big, but big company when it came in-house. Why wouldn't they do the exact same again? Yeah.
Yep. I think that, Microsoft is probably telling the truth when it says it wants to keep Call of Duty everywhere. Just go ahead and cash those checks. You know, once they own it, you know, 70% of every Call of Duty sale on PlayStation goes to them, and only 30% goes to Sony. It's pretty cool. If you're an Xbox executive, sort of trying to have conversations with Sony executives going forward, you can always like poke them with that. But like, yeah, but listen, maybe we could talk about the split or whatever. But still, Microsoft just said it blatantly. We don't have an incentive. Not true. You mentioned this. This is the next story. Bobby Kotick on Microsoft ABK acquisition. The FTC, CMA, and EU don't know our industry. This comes from James Batchelor at gi.biz. In a rare television interview, Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick said he believes UK regulators should embrace Microsoft's proposed acquisition of his company. Appearing on CNBC's Squawk Box, the executive was asked about this week's story from the New York Times, which suggested Microsoft's legal team expects the UK CMA to oppose the deal. He basically said, well, look, you look at the UK and you think about post-Brexit UK, it's probably the first country where you're seeing a recession and the real severe consequences of a recession. If you're the UK and you have an incredibly educated workforce with a lot of technical talent, places like Cambridge where the best AI and machine learning is, I would think you'd want to embrace a transaction like this where you're going to see job creation and opportunity. It really isn't at all about Sony or Microsoft's platform. It's really about the future of technology. And boy, he is bad at this. He's so bad at this. Being like,
he has so quickly decided he wants to get out of the industry. For a guy who's been in it for so long, he's like, oh no, I'd love to sell my company.
Yeah. And he's already talking up like, Cambridge Analytica. Maybe I'll go work for that evil company instead after this.
But like, it's very funny that like I'm as a Irish person, I'm not above saying shit about the UK. Sure. But it's very funny to see a like CEO basically try to neg the British government.
It's weird. You're bad at this. This is not a charm offensive or whatever you think you're doing. You just sound kind of like a shit. And it's as usual with Bobby Kotick, it's pretty like repulsive. I don't want to deal with you. So yeah, good luck to him on trying to make this work. But I don't even think most of his points feel very pointed or salient. Like they just feel like him sort of ranting at a certain point. And you're right.
I'm starting to understand why he doesn't do that many TV interviews.
Yes,
he seems like the worst person to have in a room during like a very grounded discussion where you're trying to keep cool heads. He seems like an inflammatory person.
Yes,
which I'm sure plenty of people know at this point.
It's that Mr. Incredible meme, and it's just Phil Spencer going, "Shut up, please, shut the fuck up." All right. The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom might cost $70. Let's go. Here it is. Stephen Petit at GameSpot. Ahead of today's Nintendo Direct, we may have learned something new about The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Yesterday evening, the Nintendo Switch eShop showed a $69.99 price for the highly anticipated sequel. The price has since been removed from the eShop, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was in error. Not long after the $70 price point circulated on social media, every major retailer stopped taking pre-orders for Tears of the Kingdom. The game had been available to pre-order for $60 since last summer. There's more to this, but to me, that's like, boy, that's smoke, maybe fire. What do you think?
That's like, I think the biggest takeaway here is like, from Nintendo's point of view, like, you didn't communicate with your partners clearly on this. And as much as it is probably just someone messing up and putting a page live too early, like, you really gotta give people a heads up, because now you see all the retailers like panicking and suddenly the most anticipated game of the year isn't available for pre-order.
Yes, I think that they didn't communicate because they didn't decide on this until very late. They probably decided on this since their most recent stock or their most recent financial report, which we'll talk about next. Yeah, I think we always consider doing this. We were definitely going to do it with the next generation. But while we were developing Zelda, we were always saying, hey, it would be weird to put out Zelda for less money than Returnal or Gotham Knights $70 games. That's weird, right? Zelda's better than those. Like, we just know that's just plain. That's like obvious natural law. Zelda's better than those things. So why are we charging less for it? Well, listen, that's just the price on the Switch. And then you get like one bad financial report, or one financial report where it looks like the Switch is beginning to just trail off a little bit in terms of what the money it's making. It's easy to just push the $70 button at a certain point if you're Nintendo, because they will get away with it, right? I don't think if they did this, they're not going to see any sort of major ramifications in terms of like having to pay the price of consumers turning on them, right?
Yeah, I think in one way they'll definitely have like a strong backlash at the beginning because their fans are so used to everything costs $60 all the time. Like when it comes to when Sony upped their price, people could sort of be like, well, they'll go on sale eventually. That's not fucking gonna happen with a Nintendo game. It's gonna stay at 70. It's never dropping. But yeah, they're gonna get like some flack for it at the beginning. But like, what are you going to do? Not buy the sequel to Breath of the Wild?
Not gonna be me.
Maybe they have a case where they it's that thing of looking at the bar chart of they're probably looking at two lines on a graph and going like, okay, how much will this increase piracy? Like, how many sales will we lose because we're increasing this by $10 each? And how much more money will we make by increasing it by $10 each?
Right. Yeah, this is like almost like a little bit of a tax there. Where it's like, hey, we're going to make you guys pay for all your friends who are pirates. And my friends who are pirates, I love you. I will pay. I want, I said this before the show, but let's say it on the actual recording. I want the comments to this just be roasting me for drinking the Nintendo Kool-Aid, as Axel says. I'll pay $70 for this game. I'll pay $70 for Metroid Prime 4, whatever you want to charge for. Let's go. $80? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Let's flirt with it. Let's flirt with it a little bit. I don't give a shit. Give me these goddamn games. That's dangerous talk for someone in Nintendo jail. You're not getting any of these for free. Yeah. You have to pay for all of them. Exactly. And they don't pay very well for the manual labor in Nintendo jail. That's for sure. That industrial complex. Yes. So the other part of this is, this wasn't the only game taken down from pre-orders from retail sites. Metroid Prime 4 also taken down. Now, these things could be, let's just be real. Like you said, it's most likely an error. These things could be an overreaction from these retailers who all saw that, didn't hear anything from Nintendo, and are just saying, oh, there's a direct tomorrow. We should just wait until we hear one way or the other about these big games that actually get the most pre-orders from, a first-party Nintendo game. I'm ready to believe we're gonna get Metroid Prime 4 news so they could tell us it's $70 so we could start paying that price instead. Let's go. I don't care anymore. I believe. I'm a fool though, right, Lexi?
Do you think it's even Metroid Prime 4 is even pre-ordering that well? When we talk about Metroid sales?
Probably not.
You have to imagine, how much is the spin-off of Metroid doing, especially when it's been in development hell for so long? How many people do they go fronting up the money for?
One pre-order a day, maybe? Yeah, but that's probably not doing super well. You're right. That's just, that was me in my Metroid bubble there. It is like a big one that if someone who's paying attention was like, there's a chance they could talk about that Metroid Prime game at this direct tomorrow. But yeah, to me, the simplest explanation here, Occam's razor, is these games are going to be $70. That's actually the simplest explanation to me. Because Nintendo would do that, they could get away with it. Why wouldn't they do it at a certain point? And so, yeah, here we are. The toothpaste is out of the tube on $70 games. So Nintendo sort of leaving that money on the table does begin to look weird to investors when you're going to put out a game that by all expectations, Tears of the Kingdom should get to 15 million copies sold relatively quickly, and then over time is going to get to 25 million, more than likely. So why wouldn't you just take that extra cash?
You're just following industry standards. You're just doing what everyone else does, and there's only so mad that people are going to get at you because of that.
Let's talk about that other side of the story here. Nintendo's stock price dropped 7.5% after latest financial results. This comes from Chris Scullion at VGC. The company is
VGC. Who are those jokers?
Yeah, I don't know. I just write down the letters here. I don't know if it even stands for anything. Video game clowns, probably. The company's Tokyo Stock Exchange price dropped from 5,624 yen down to 5,201 yen. That's its biggest drop in over a year. And again, it's about 7.5%. The drop puts Nintendo's share price back to roughly where it was in January 2022, when it dropped to 5,192 yen. And this is just a negative reaction to the publication of Nintendo's latest financial results on Tuesday. In its results for the first 9 months of the fiscal year 23, Nintendo said its net sales were down 1.9% at 1,295 billion yen, which is about $9.9 billion. And net profit was down 5.8% at 346.2 billion yen, about $2.6 billion. The company said fluctuations in foreign exchange markets had contributed to sales and profits declining, despite strong sales of Switch games and hardware. But it also knocked down its expectations for the Switch through the end of this fiscal year, which is through the end of March of 2023, from 19 million to 18 million. So overall, it expects to sell about 1 million less Switches, and that's that's before Tears of the Kingdom is here. But they are saying, hey, things are slow. They're trending backward for the Switch. To me, that goes back to, all right, where else can we make money from, and how can we make the most from every single decision we're making here? But yeah, this is also just natural, right? The Switch is on the way out. We all know this.
Yeah, do you really think that the people higher up at Nintendo even really are too phased by this drop? They just had record-setting years. They have a lineup which they seem very confident in. They're looking down the barrel of a Switch 2 at some point in the next fiscal year or two. They probably aren't that upset. They probably knew this was coming.
Yeah, I think that it's
because everyone's down. Everyone's doing less than they were doing last year. So there's only so heartbroken you can be. Yeah.
Sorry, you dropped out there for a second when I started talking over you. No, it's all good. I think Nintendo is probably mostly not phased, but this is slightly new for them. I think one of the analysts that some of these sites talked to pointed this out. I'm not seeing it right now, but basically this is the first time they're going into a console generation transition without having two systems on the market at the same time, the home console and the handheld console. They could previously they could sort of stagger those things, and that was their strategy, and at least they understood that, and they were able to pull that off multiple times without much issue, and they got pretty good at it. This is the first time where they are completely cutting off a generation, or they're going to attempt to do that. At least that's a possibility, to step to something new, and that might be giving them a little bit of the jitters, where they're not quite sure how to pull off that maneuver. Which is why I think they might try something wild, like instead of doing a full Switch 2, they do just do the equivalent of a Game Boy Color for the Switch, because they're hey, we could just keep this generation going, and maybe that makes more sense, and we should have a lot more continuity, and it'll be a lot more powerful, but mostly it's still just a Switch. But again, that's just me trying to speculate there. But I do think they're a little bit phased, to answer your question. I don't think they're so phased, because of course they always knew this would come. It's probably hard to predict what is the rate of decline of the Switch going to be going forward. Is it going to be very rapid, or will it have a slow tail off? They seem to be predicting a pretty slow tail off, and when Tears of the Kingdom comes, that's probably going to be true, because that's going to renew interest across the board for Switch and Zelda and all that stuff, and they'll make a lot of money.
Do you think there's any universe where the follow-up to the Switch doesn't hit as hard as the Switch? Doesn't do as well as the first Switch does? Do you think there's any way they fuck it up?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely. It's Nintendo. They could do some weird stuff. And even if it is just a new Switch, the reality on the ground is not the same as when the Switch launched, when it was like this breath of fresh air of, here is a new way to play your console quality games that frees you, and for people who struggle to just sit at a TV for hours or need to play games on the go, well, this thing's going to fit into your life in a way that like never before. We do have the Steam Deck now, and while that's not necessarily a competitor, it is opening up this competing concept, or this competing space of, well, you don't necessarily have to go with Nintendo for your gaming on the go needs. There is this whole portable PC handheld market that is only going to get bigger and better, and it's going to have more rapid improvements, because there's going to be multiple players in that space, and the games are cheaper, and there's a wider variety of games in certain areas. So it's like, okay, yeah, so Nintendo going up against that could look out of touch in a way that they looked very much like ahead of the curve with the Switch. That could happen. It's probably not going to. The Switch is strength is, even regardless of its form factor, is its games, and those games seem like they're still going to be pretty big heavy hitters for the most part. If they put out a new Mario Kart, a new 3D Mario that's as good as Odyssey, that's going to go a long way towards answering all those questions in an instant, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So when it comes to their next games, we're getting onto it.
Yes, that's exactly right. Nintendo Direct today. We talked about this on the Bombcast a little bit yesterday, but I want to see do you have any predictions for what's coming? I've kind of been thinking about it. I want to believe a new Wave Race is coming, but that's a hope more than a prediction. What are you hoping for, and then what are you predicting?
Yeah, I'm almost like done predicting things for the Switch because it's either things that have been rumored so much that everyone just has kind of accepted they're coming, or there's stuff that we never would have predicted, so there's no point in trying to guess it. The thing that like I'd hope for that I really don't know where it went was for a while there after the Cadence of Hyrule came out, there was like this feeling like, what if they did this with like more indie games? What if they did this with where they licensed out their IP to like smaller developers and let them do weird shit? And like that was really exciting. And then just like that never materialized into any other games.
Yep.
And I would love it if they went back into giving their IP, like sort of Konami are saying they're going to start doing, of like start licensing out their IP to smaller developers.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that Cadence of Hyrule was so promising in terms of that being the future. I would love to see that initiative grow into something real, and into a real initiative. I want Nintendo Switch Online to get some attention. I want them to be like, hey, yeah, we know we can't just continue resting on our laurels there, even though we do have more N64 games coming, sure. But no, I want to see Game Boy Color, and probably even Game Boy Advance on there. I think it's time. Do all three at the same time. If you have to, put Game Boy and Game Boy Color on the $20 tier, put Game Boy Advance on the $50 tier. I'm fine with that. Again, I'm a sicko. Again, roast me in the comments. Listen, I'm allowed to point out my faults because it's okay to have them then. If I point them out, I'm morally in the clear for still being a complete and utter simp for Nintendo. You can criticize me, and you should.
What sort of games would you like to see in the lineup for the Game Boy, or for both the Game Boys?
I mean, Donkey Kong 94, the original Link's Awakening, DX, Golden Sun for the Game Boy Advance. I'm expecting mostly first-party stuff because I think Nintendo's maybe a little bit over trying to make these deals with third parties that are frustrating to work with and want more money than they're willing to pay. Of course, Nintendo probably does underpay for that stuff. But also, I imagine Square Enix probably wants a lot of money to make Super Mario RPG happen, and that's why it's not happening. So yeah, a lot of first party stuff that's very easy, and yeah, I think that's pretty likely. But
and they bring back Ninja Cop.
Yes, Ninja 5.0 as well. Is that?
Yes. Yes, same thing.
Yes, let's fucking go. All right. And then let's just Metroid Prime HD remaster. Let's go. Let's just make it happen. Let's just let my hair come back, please. I don't know. You were like this morning, I think it might happen. I'm like, well, we'll see. I want to believe, but I got so hurt by that one that I'm like, I actually can't physically bring myself to believe anymore.
Will you play the game when it comes out? Or will
I play the game all the time. I will honestly just
will you finally play 2?
Yes, I will actually. That's what I'll probably do. While everyone's playing Metroid Prime 1 on their Switch, I'll go and finally really play through 2. I played it a bunch when it first came out, but I never finished it and didn't get super far, I don't think. But I'll get into it, and that'll be fun. All right. We don't have to wait long. But honestly, by the time most people probably hear this show, it'll all have already happened if you're listening later on your podcast feeds and all of that. But still, come back in time and tell me how good it was or how miserable it was. That's the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Direct way. Okay. We have a poll from Monday. I think I have it right here. Actually, in the meantime, Lexi, why don't you tell people where they can find you, what you have going on this week, things like that.
Yeah, so you can find me at TheGamer. I'm a junior editor there. I'm doing my college work placement there. When I finish up there, I'll be going back to freelancing, and I will be running the website that I run in my own spare time called StartMenu, which can be found at TheStartMenu on Twitter, which is a website for young and sort of aspiring journalists to get their start, have a safe space to interact with other journalists, find mentors, find opportunities for paying positions, and just have a safe and healthy community. So yeah, come check us out and visit TheGamer as well.
Awesome. I have the poll here right now. There we go. Will you be upset if Dragon Age 4 has a full real-time action style, and then in parentheses, God of War 2018 combat? A lot of people were happy to point out that it basically already had real-time combat. And I'm like, well, that's why I put all the extra stuff about God of War in there. But fair enough. 76.2% said no. 23.8% said yes. I think the biggest response here, Lexi, was people saying, yeah, combat, whatever. what I'm really caring about, what I really crave with Dragon Age is my stories and my favorite characters and my romances and the political intrigue. That's the stuff I need to be represented well. And the combat can be secondary because it always was secondary to me. Are you a Dragon Age person?
That's the thing I'm most worried about, because I'm not huge into Dragon Age, but I just got done re-watching all of Mass Alex. And so finally getting to see through all of the Mass Effect games and then listening to some Mass Effect Andromeda playthrough and being like, oh god, the writing really did drop off. It's not like when you see people defend Mass Effect Andromeda, now I look at them and they're like, what are you on about? No, the writing in that is fucking terrible. It is so much worse than those original 3 games, and I really hope that they manage to, whatever writing team they brought back in for Dragon Age and whatever writing team they have going forward for Mass Effect. I know they brought on the Guardians of the Galaxy writer for the Mass Effect game. I really hope that they can turn that around and that they can help. I know it feels like those franchises have so much more to give because those universes are great, and it would be a shame if they were to sort of wither and die.
I have a new poll that will be for tomorrow's show, but I'm not going to run it yet. I am going to run it, and it's kind of cut off here, whatever. I'm going to run it after the Nintendo Direct today, so I'm going to schedule it. We'll just schedule it now. Well, I think I could schedule a poll. What grade do you give the Direct? I'm going to put an A. I'm going to put a B. I think you only have four options, so I should just go C and then D or lower. Because I mean, it's a D is basically failing, right? That's D or lower.
B, without having seen anything, without knowing anything, I'm going to say it's a solid B.
I'm right there with you. I'm going to vote a B right now. We'll vote early. Everyone else has to wait. All right.
They have a lot of things that they need to clear up for the first half of the year. They'll have a few things for the second half. Yeah, it'll be a good show.
It's not let me schedule. Let's get them on Twitter, not on TweetDeck. That's fine. I'll figure that out in a bit. All right, that poll will go up after the Direct, everybody, so look out for that. In the meantime, Lexi, thank you so much for spending today talking with me about video games. I really appreciate it.
For having me on. Seriously, as someone who's followed the website for a long time, for someone who watched the Mario Party parties when they were in a very dark place, and that was the thing that kept them going, it's really quite the honor to be on. So it's lovely talking to you.
Hey, you did great. I'm really glad you came on. We'll have you on again. Thank you, everybody, for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. You really are. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.